So basically we were talking internally, we just couldn't hear, we couldn't listen. But then once we discovered our system, we started listening to each other. We weren't just talking into the void, but we actually also listened. Hey y'all and everybody, thanks for switching into Housemates for Life, a podcast powered by plurals for plurals and everybody else who wants to hear more about the insanely awesome world of plurality. Here we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly and the beautiful sides of sharing a body and mind. In this episode we talk about communication, a very essential part of being plural. First we will briefly cover what means of communication systems can have and what communication with other system members is actually good for. We will then share a bit about how we as a system learn to communicate with each other, because this was actually a longer path than it seems, and why it is essential for us to communicate with each other and also to outside people. We are the voices of just a rather very insane system, aka Jarvis. I'm your host Matt, and I'm together with my headmates Will and Yuri today. If you enjoy listening to our podcast Housemates for Life, please tell a friend or more and leave a like, subscribe, rate, comment and everything else you do to show your support and appreciation. Many thanks. Now without further ado, let's get on with our show. Alright, so let's start talking about different forms of communication for plural systems between system members. Well, there are two main categories of communication. One is external communication and the other is internal communication. So usually, not always, but usually systems start out communicating or practicing communication by external means. That is, for example, writing notes for each other, leaving notes, sticky notes or notes on the phone or computer. Some have journals, like extra journals to write in, sometimes a collective journal for all system members, or we have heard of systems using different journals, so each system has their own journal for more privacy between each other or for organizational purposes. Then in today's modern age of information, we also have virtual or digital means to communicate with each other externally. So you could use text chats, using messenger apps or writing notes on your phone. A very common thing that plurals can do is using the Discord chat app, and if you set up your own private Discord server, you can also include a Discord bot called Plural Kit that allows you to use different usernames and avatars for each system member, so you can more easily sign off your messages, which is pretty neat. Not all system members in every system can read and write or don't like to read and write, so there are also other possibilities to communicate with each other. For example, expressing yourself through drawing pictures, painting, or music, singing, all kinds of things, or many other different gestures. So physical expressions, making yourself noticeable through physical motion of the body. If you're co-fronting with some other headmate, you can maybe express a want or need through a physical hand gesture, or if you simply just want to tell a system member how much you like them, you just do something nice for them. If some system member is struggling and you're at the front, just do some chores in the house and make your other system members happy. Whatever makes them happy, just do it for them. That can also, even if you can't directly communicate with your system members, this is a good way to show your system members how you feel about them. Now for internal communication, which can be a bit more difficult for some systems. Other systems might find it more intuitive to communicate with system members internally. It really differs a lot from system to system. And also, the way internal communication works or feels like can also be extremely different between systems, but also between system members. There's a term, I don't know how common that term is, but we use it with friends a lot, is called thought talk. So the way you may talk internally might be very, very, very different from how you would talk externally with other physical friends. And we think there's a difference between having an internal dialogue with your system members versus voice hearing. So we have never really experienced voice hearing, or maybe only in forms of being half awake and having some sort of dream, like hallucination or something. But we know there are a lot of people, whether they're plural or not plural, who report they actually hear voices, like as if they're something external or a distinct voice in the head. But for us personally, when it comes to system communication internally, it's more like having an internal monologue, but it's actually a dialogue. So it feels like the thoughts come from the same brain. It all kind of feels familiar. It doesn't feel like coming from an external source, but each channel of voice has their own different individual expression and self-awareness, right? So it's a, I don't know what I want to say, it's a dialogue between two or more people. Then there are more vague or subtle forms of internal communication, like communicating through emotional expression. So sometimes you want to say something, but you don't really have the words for it, or you can't really formulate thoughts, so you can just express that feeling internally, and the other system members, when they're co-conscious, might be able to feel those feelings and this way understand how you feel without even talking to each other. You could compare this to, you see an outside friend looking sad, making a sad face, so without saying a word, they can communicate to you what they might feel internally. I think the advantage for system plurals is that this kind of communication via emotions is I think a lot more effective than trying to figure out what outside people try to tell you or feel or think. It's not always correct. Like, we can misinterpret other people's feelings internally and externally, both. But yeah, sometimes it's so much quicker and easier to say what you want to say, but without using words, just sending that feeling over to another helpmate. It can be so quick and easy, and that's pretty cool and neat. And similarly, we sometimes can communicate via mental visualization. So we imagine a picture or express our thought in an image, and well, it's kind of like expressing yourself through art, but in your head, and the others can see it and interpret it. And then, of course, there are other ways of imaginational senses. So we don't really have that. Our brain is very visual, so we don't really know how it works or how it may be like. But I guess you can express yourself through sounds or smells, or I don't know. But like imagined in your head, and the others can then hear that or smell that or taste that. And then, yeah, hopefully understand what you're trying to say. So much for the different forms of communication, and probably there are more. If you have more or know more or use more, let us know in the comments. Now, I want to talk a bit about what is this actually good for? Why should system members talk to each other? Maybe this is a no-brainer, but I think it's good to talk about it and be on the same page. So for one, internal communication helps to sort out individual members, like get a better feeling for who's in your system and who are these people. So via communication is a very, very good tool to actually get to know each other, talk about each other, and also get to know your individual self. So oftentimes, for us at least, it's unless we are at front and actively expressing ourselves through talking and communication, we often don't have a good grasp on who we are, what we think, or what we feel. So that was at least my experience, my personal experience, Matt talking here right now. When we discovered our system, I felt like I'm just this silly goofy voice in our head, and I would front sometimes, I would co-front a lot, but I would always feel very much like an afterthought, like a random addition to whatever's going on in my handmaid's life. But even so, I took part in our system meetings we had in the early months, a couple of meetings. We would get together, talk about stuff, and trying to figure out who we are. And like, I had the opportunity then to contemplate about myself, about my identity, who I am and who I want to be, and so on. And that really helped me to sort myself and understand myself and see myself in a new light also. I mean, it was very familiar light, like I've always been this person, but it really helped me understand it from a different angle, like by talking about myself and formulating my own thoughts and feelings and opinions without my system members interfering. That's very essential for us in our system, because we often feel very blended and blurred together. And we talked about this a lot in previous episodes, but it helps us to unblend or ground ourselves in our identities. If we manage to communicate with each other, we can then better distinguish each other, our identities, and feel more grounded in ourselves, basically. And of course, as we get to know each other, we also have the ability to communicate and express our individual needs. And once we have that, we can then figure out ways to accommodate them. Just, very, very essential actually for every human being to understand their needs, expressing them, and getting accommodation for that. And speaking of which, so communication is basically the foundation of cooperation. So communication and cooperation are two very essential aspects of plural life and living a healthy life as a plural system or multiple system. So without communication, without talking to each other, there can't be cooperation between each other. So if you want to improve your plural life, it's highly recommended that you learn to communicate with each other if you don't have those means yet. And it's okay to start small, so you don't have to learn to communicate with your whole system all at once. You can really start small, learn to communicate with at least one member of the system, and then once you get the hang of it, you can also teach that skill to other system members. and also motivate other system members to join the club. Not all system members actually want to talk to you, and that's also perfectly fine and should be respected. But if you start talking to some system members who are motivated, who are interested in talking to you, you can sometimes actually activate other members to join. At least that's our experience. And yeah, so once you have established communication, you can actually use that to make important life decisions. So sometimes you just want to be your individual self and be autonomous in your way of living. But as a system, you gotta acknowledge that some of your choices, some of the decisions that individual members make or want to make can actually have a great effect on all system members, or at least a few system members. Especially choices or decisions that need to be made that affect the body or your life situation, like your job, your physical health, also mental health, of course. There's also this discourse or wrong belief that if you're multiple, you can't make those choices, apparently. I mean, we talked about ableism in the previous episode, if you want to check that out. But essentially, a very singular-centric mindset is that once your identity is split into multiple people, you suddenly can't function as a collective human being. But I mean, we're just a group of people. You know, when you can communicate with each other, you can also sort out opinions. You can make decisions between each other. It's like being a sports club. And yeah, I mean, all members of the team want something out of that collective group and gotta arrange with each other, team up, and figure out strategies together to achieve a common goal, right? And you can talk about these things when you can communicate with each other. There's no problem at all. And some systems even have different organizational setups. So depending on the size of the system, there could be a few members representing the whole system, or all system members get a vote, or depending on the topic that is to be discussed, certain members, a certain group of members get to make decisions on behalf of others or something like that. There can be even elections. For example, me, Matt, I'm elected system lord in our system. So when shit hits the fan and we have like crisis or indecisiveness is a common thing for us, then I get the final word in the discussion. Because yeah, my system members trust me that I will make a choice in the best interest of all of us. So yeah, that's kind of my quote unquote role as a system lord. But other than that, we are just a loose group of housemates, basically. And we have a few rules and guidelines. Some of them are even written in a kind of rule book, or not unwritten, it's written in a codex, like the pirate codex of our system or something like that. But yeah, there are so many different ways of organizing your system, and that's also very important that you actually can communicate about that with each other. Okay, so now I talked a lot about communication, what it can look like and why it's important, yada yada. Now you probably wonder, okay, how does it work? How do we get to communicate with each other, how can we improve our communication, and so on and so on. And I think I will leave the next part to my handmaid Will, and we will try to actually switch in and out. Let's see how that works. Try to talk a bit about our own experience from our individual experiences. Let's go. Will, the stage is yours. Okay, then let me switch in briefly and get rid of Matt. He's still next to me, influencing me a lot, it feels like, but I think I can talk from my perspective now. So yes, so in the beginning, when we discovered our system almost 2 years ago, we felt very fake, or I felt very fake, because we naturally could communicate with each other internally, not as good as we do this day, but we could do it, right? And often you hear in the community, in the plural community, especially in the clinical community, that communication is not a given, that communication is one of the modern treatments, or like the first things that you learn or work on when you are diagnosed with DID, or if you discover your system naturally. So it made us feel like, or I should say made me feel like an imposter. Like, I can't be plural if I can easily communicate with other members in my system, right? But then later on, we actually thought about it, and we actually had worked on our communication for a long time. We have been practicing external and internal communication in our system for over a decade by now, without actually knowing it. So we didn't know that we're a system. We didn't know that plurality is a thing. But effectively, we have actually been engaging with our system a couple times before, and we have also been practicing communication before. So we're actually not naturals in that sense. And often, so if you can't communicate with your system, or if you struggle communicating with your system, you gotta acknowledge that it can be a lot of work, actually. So some systems are actually natural communicators, but a lot of systems don't have that. And it's kind of like exercising, physical workout. You need to also train your mental muscles, and do it often, do it regularly. And the first what's it called? The first experience we had with system communication was actually in our teenage years. And I think I will hand over to my headmate Yori now to talk about that. Hey, this is Yori, and I think I talked about this before when we talked about our discovery journey briefly. But basically, one of our first plural experiences was talking to some internal spiritual entity in our brain. So we always thought, or we always knew or felt like it's happening in our brain. It's nothing external. It felt like talking to another me. And so, yeah, I mean, in that sense, you could say we were naturals at system communication, because that just happened. We did not intentionally thought of, oh, let's talk to another being in our head. It's just, I mean, it's a long time ago, so we don't quite remember the details when it happened, or how it happened, or how it started, but we don't remember that we actually intentionally did that. It just happened. And I think what helped us to become better and better at communication is taking it more or less seriously. So we understood the usefulness of talking to that being. Like, it was kind of an emotional relief for us in certain situations, or just plainly entertaining. And we kept doing it for a while, not on a regular basis, not every day, but every once in a while we would engage with that internal voice or internal other thought channel we would have a dialogue with. And yeah, I think it's very essential if you want to establish communication, especially internally. You gotta take it seriously. You gotta want it, right? You gotta want it. Yeah. Yeah, not sure what else to say about this. But that was kind of, the foundation, I guess, for our plural communication. And also later on, when we had similar experience with other headmates, we would kind of remember that time back then and be like, hey, this is very similar to when we talked to that other spirit entity back then. And then a few years later, in our late teens, we started to write letters to our quote-unquote self. So back then, assuming we're one person, we would write a letter to our future self, kind of like you write a journal, but in form of a letter, pretending we're writing this to a friend. And then every few years after that, we would read the previous letter. We would then write a reply to that and news updates about the current state of life and stuff. We would do that a couple of times, right? 3, 4, 5 times. I don't remember. And even though we didn't know about our plurality, we didn't know, we were like, in hindsight, when we read these letters, we can tell at different points it was different system members writing different parts of the letters. So sometimes we can recognize our quote-unquote voices in our writing. But even if we didn't know back then, it still was a way that we communicated with each other and kind of got more in touch with each other. So we learned more about each other. And whether you're plural or singular, I recommend doing that. I mean, we're not doing it right now anymore because we communicate a lot more than every once in a while, every couple of years. But I think it's a great exercise to get a better understanding where you're at in your life. What are the important things currently in your life that you would like to pass on to your future self or selves? And then reading that, and it helps reflecting your current situation. Did you accomplish the goals that you set for yourself a couple of years ago? What changed? How did it change? What would you reply to your past self? And so on and so on. And then later, I think I also talked about this before in another episode, we started communicating, or I started communicating with my system members via meditation practices. And it wasn't intentional. It was not like, I wasn't thinking, okay, I want to communicate with these other selves inside of me, let's meditate. No, it was more like the other way around. I was interested in meditation practices, and then it kind of opened up some access to my headmates. And a word of warning here: if you live with dissociation or trauma or suspect something like that, Be careful about meditation practices. They can be triggering. They can trigger dissociative states, and they can potentially trigger trauma memories. Be mindful of that. Try find guided meditation and guidance from people who are trauma informed, who know about that thing. But other than that, I think meditation can be a good tool to get more access to your headmates, especially when you have some barriers, subconscious or conscious barriers between your members. It's kind of like in certain meditation practices, you let your thoughts happen, your feelings, you let them pass through you, and you become more or less an observant of those. So by doing that, this is all in hindsight, but it feels like this is what happened to us. Is by meditating, I became an observer of my other headmates or system members, or I could see them more clearly. Not see them visually, but I could feel their thoughts and feelings passing through the body and the mind, and observe them and start to sort them out and try to make more sense of it all, or just being more aware of it. And so as I learn more about what's going on in our head and with our system members, back then still not knowing about plurality, but kind of identifying these quote-unquote parts in our mind, at some point we basically combined both. We combined the writing letters to ourselves and communicating with different quote-unquote parts. We're not parts, but back then we treated each other as parts, or we interpreted what we're experiencing as parts of one person. And I think maybe I head back over to my headmate, Will, for this one. Hi, this is Will again. I feel like we're just repeating ourselves from previous episode where we talked about our system discovery journey, because I guess a lot of our discovery journey had to do with learning to communicate with each other. But I guess it doesn't hurt if we talk about this twice. So at some point when we were in a very chaotic mental state, let's say, I won't go into details here right now, we did that previously, but essentially there was a lot of emotional turmoil inside our system back then, a couple of years ago. And so, as Yuri said, we kind of started making more use of what we've learned previously, more conscious use of it. So we started just writing notes to get a clearer sense of what's going on, because it was so chaotic, and basically we were switching from day to day, I guess, and it just helped to write notes in these different states. And we started to treat our parts, treating each other more seriously, exactly like we treated this spiritual being back then as a real part of our internal experience. We also treated our emotions and our parts, well, let's say each other, as more real. Like we used to intellectualize a lot our internal experience in the past, especially I did. So I'm angry and there's XYZ reason for that, and there's no reason actually to be angry, so let's stop being angry, or something like that, Or being sad is for children. Not really, but kind of this attitude. Like rationalizing away emotions was a very common thing to do. So back then, when there was a lot of emotional turmoil, we were like, okay, let's let's not rationalize them away, because they are real, they are there, they are affecting our lives. So let's be real here. So yeah, we were writing these notes and actually actively working on figuring out what's going on, and at some point extended that into journaling, but not journaling in the classic sense, writing about the day, but more like, yeah, it was more like writing letters to each other. Like we did before, writing letters to the future self, we then started writing letters to each other. Still not knowing about our system or what systems are. But we basically long before we started understanding our system, we already talked to each other. We already communicated to each other, at least externally. And this happened over a couple of years, a time over a couple of years. So yeah, if you still struggle with communication or want to learn communication and can't really get the hang of it, like, it can take time, a lot of time and practice. And then after discovery, so around about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we then even more seriously texted each other physically, but soon would do that virtually. So using phone notes, or then we learned about the plural kit that you can use on Discord. So we have this Discord server, private Discord server, where we have different channels for different purposes, where using plural kit we can each express ourselves there, talk to each other very easily, chat with each other, having conversations. At the beginning, it was super awkward, I swear, especially for me. I remember we would sit at the computer using Discord, plural kit, and having like dialogue with each other, writing to each other, like back and forth. And then at some point you kind of snap out of it. You take a step back from the computer and you're like, what the heck am I doing? Am I seriously chatting with myself? So yeah, that was a time of a lot of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, feeling fake, and all of that. So if it feels awkward to you, especially at the beginning, I guess it's normal. But yeah, the more we did it, the more we engaged with it, the more we understood the benefits of it, the more we took it also seriously. And nowadays it's like, yeah, second nature. We don't even think about it, how awkward it might be for outsiders, but we know enough plurals to feel validated that this is a totally normal, mentally healthy thing to do. And yeah, upon system discovery, also had way more easier access to internal communication. We already communicated before discovery internally, like without knowing it, that's what's happening. But like we existed before discovery as we exist now, just not as aware of it. And we also existed as a blurry mess. We have been co-conscious before. So we had lots and lots and lots and lots of moments before where we had multiple thoughts in our heads, all trying to express themselves, or conflicting feelings and emotions that just didn't make sense together. So basically we were talking internally, we just couldn't hear, we couldn't listen. But then once we discovered our system, we started listening to each other. We weren't just talking into the void, but we actually also listened to each other. And it's kind of like, yeah, just being more aware of your thoughts, being more aware of your feelings. Not yours, but feelings and thoughts that are floating around in your system. And then the more you get to know your handmaids, the easier you can sort all these different sources to your handmaids. And then it's kind of like they get their own voice, or they already have their own voice. And sometimes it's so easy to recognize each other's voices. And sometimes it's, very blurry, very blendy, very chaotic, very plural. So I remember so many times in the past, there were moments where we were in real conflict. Like, yes, even singular people know this, but you want one thing, but your conscience says, no, you can't do that, or you can't have that for this and this reason. Like, I don't know, there's a book you want to buy, and you really want that book, but something inside of you tells you, no, we have already spent so much money this year or this month, and I shouldn't spend more money on recreational stuff or something like that. And we would have these internal discussions without understanding that we're different people. So I would have this internal conflict of, I want that, but I don't want to spend money. And then this other voice that back then I thought is me, but clearly that was Matt in the background, who was then shouting from the background. I don't even know how to translate it in English, but in German he would always say "gönn dir," which is slang for like, just do it, enjoy yourself, do something nice for yourself, god damn it. And so sometimes I would listen to that voice, and sometimes I wouldn't. Like, today it's so much more clearer to us because we are more aware of our system. So when that voice shouts in the back, I know, okay, Matt is here. So we have known our system for almost 2 years now, and we've been talking to each other on a daily basis since then. First more externally, writing, especially chatting, but also more and more internally. And now, there is no day that we don't talk to each other. I mean, there are sometimes days where we feel very blurry, very blended, where we just can't talk to each other. But there's at least some point in the day where we at least try to reach out. So that's why our internal communication at this point is very smooth. It just flows. It's it's just existing, letting these thoughts and feelings all have their place in this head, and being able to better distinguish them and sort them out. Or, well, on blurry days we're not, but who cares? When we're blurry, nobody cares. And I guess the next step that we would like to learn is talking to each other, but externally, like vocally. I think Matt wants to talk about this. He's like, I feel very influenced right now, and he's like in the back, like stepping on one foot to the other and be like, I want to talk. Okay. So ironically, so this is Matt, hi. Ironically, we are right now basically practicing talking externally, like making our internal voices more vocal, more expressive on the outside. So we're a very covert system, or used to be a very covert system, meaning that our plurality wasn't or isn't very noticeable from the outside, which is most systems actually. Like, you can't really, like, you probably have met a lot of plural people who you would never think anything like that of these humans that you meet. Anyhow, so the voices that we have internally are way more distinct or expressive on good days. And we want to practice that, to externalize that also to the outside. And we started this podcast project for one reason, to practice that, to make our voices visible or audible to the outside world, and to ourselves also. And yeah, like this, what we did in this just now in this episode, like also allowing ourselves to switch mid conversation. This is not easy. It's like, because you're so focused on a subject, and then it's hard to simultaneously also keep track of your internal thoughts. And more often than not, we tend to blend and blur together rather than actually switching. But we want to practice that. So you are right now not live, but kind of live experiencing us practicing system communication. Yay! Now, in the last part, we want to tell you why communication between each other and also communication externally is very essential for us, for our plural existence and life. And I feel like this is something that Will would like to ramble about, so go ahead. Yeah, so Will here again. I guess we implied that before already, but system communication is very useful for us at least, and I think a lot of plurals would say so. It helps a lot with clarity. So on difficult topics or important topics, let's say, like most of our communication is internally these days, but in some occasions, when it's about important subjects, we really want to hear what others think, especially infrequent fronters in the back. We use external communication, so we write notes, or more like we chat with each other on our Discord server. And it's just good to have that written down for later reference. This is especially important if you struggle with amnesia, or also for us, we experience emotional amnesia. So if someone from the back, someone who is not fronting daily like Matt and I do a lot, if they express themselves one day, well, the next day it's not gone, but we still have the kind of the episodic memory of that happening, but the emotions are just not there, and it can be easily washed under the carpet if we don't have it actually written out somewhere. So if we want to make goals or discuss decisions and stuff, it's very important that we actually have it written down. Also in the early stages, I just this thought just came up. In the early stages, having written quote unquote proof of your system members, your very different conflicting emotions and opinions, having written physical proof of that, it has helped so much with self-doubt. Like at some point, the more you write with your handmates, the less you can deny it. Like at some point, you're like, you have to accept it as part of your reality. There's no way around it. Yeah, and as Matt just basically said, is that we use communication as like a form of self-expression or being more authentic. So communicating helps feeling more grounded in our identity and not some blurry zombie blob. So yeah, it helps us to be more ourselves, be more authentic, and essentially communicating with each other is such a natural and essential part of our life, especially nowadays. Yeah, we talk to each other every day. It's like we are housemates hanging out. And well, when you live with other people in your house, you're not just silently passing each other. You just gonna chat with each other and it's so normal for us to talk to each other. I mean, we don't do it every second of our life, so we can't do that every second of our life, but yeah, often enough to feel like it's a very integral part of who we are and how we live, etc., etc. Which brings me to the next and last discussion point, is the challenges that we face with outside communication, or communicating with people who are not part of our system. So oftentimes it feels like we can nowadays way better communicate with each other than with outside people. And the core reason for that is we have this one channel, the channel being our body or our mouth, but at the same time we have multiple sources of thoughts and feelings and opinions that are created or generated, or they happen in our brain, and they all wanna charge to the front. They all wanna get pressed through that physical medium called body. And so it's either gonna be a mess, blended, blurry, mushed together mess, like it used to be before we knew about our plurality, or we gotta suppress one another. So we often, when we can, we practice that. If one of us wants to be in a certain situation, in a social interaction, usually when talking to a friend, one of us wants to actually be there and experience that moment, then we often have to try very hard to suppress the other or others in our system. So when we talk to people, then thoughts and feelings get triggered by whatever the other person is saying, but we want to consciously let only one of us speak, at least for the most part. And then it also happens that we accidentally talk over each other or influence each other. And it's very difficult to take turns in an active conversation. Like, we can do that now in the podcast. We can like I can talk, and then I can sense that, I don't know, Matt wants to say something, or I feel like Yuri has a better view or opinion, or can better explain something. So I'm like, okay, so I can say, I will let Yuri switch in now, and then it takes a moment, like you won't notice in this podcast because we edit this, but it takes a couple of seconds to come to the front and ground ourselves enough to talk from our individual perspective. So we can do that in the podcast because we are in control. We're not in an active back and forth conversation. But in real life, we're not talking to a microphone. So it's difficult, and it's socially not acceptable, right? I mean, or it feels awkward to request that, to be like, wait a second, I want to let my system mate switch in to have a say in this conversation, something like that. People are not used to that, I'd say. And even talking to other plurals, it's still awkward to us, at least, to me at least. I'm not sure how other plurals feel about that, and I guess this also needs a lot of practice. But that's how it is right now. Reality is right now. Shit, man, I should practice talking. So what I want to say, we have notes. Oh yeah, right. So, and if we can't do that, if we can't switch in a conversation, or if we can't channel through all of our sources through this one channel, some of us may feel left out in the social context or in a discussion. Like, Like, it's weird, quote unquote weird, when you have a deep discussion about a topic and you have a very firm opinion on that, but then at the same time, somebody in the back of your system is like, yeah, but my perspective is this, and that. I can feel that. We can feel that usually. We feel these thoughts coming up, or these emotions, these revolting emotions of, no, what you're saying isn't quite right. But we usually tend to not express that because it's weird to say something in a conversation, in an active discussion, and then just in the next moment be like, no, that's not true. No, I have a different opinion on that. Like, who does that, right? I mean, plurals do that, but we don't do that actively, overtly in our social context. So that's very problematic, and I think a lot of plurals suffer from that, not just us. So yeah, to sum that up, so it can feel either very intrusive, being passively influenced, being blurry. I feel very uncomfortable often in social contexts. I feel very inauthentic when I am around, when I'm co-conscious, but another handmate expresses their opinion, and that's absolutely not my opinion. I'm like, I wanna leave right now. I don't want to be associated with that opinion, or I don't know, character trait or whatever. And then at least I feel very miserable very quickly. I start to dissociate. I feel it can trigger episodes of depersonalization, and it's not nice. And yeah, it's just very inauthentic. I feel very inauthentic talking to other people a lot of times. I mean, it gets better. We practice a lot and it gets better, but so much work, so much hard work. And I feel like we collectively as a community, a plural community, also have to work on raising awareness, making it, normalizing the plural experience. Yeah, we have a long way to go, I guess. And I think I hand over to Matt now. That's your thing. Bye, everyone and every many. Thank you, Will. That was very nicely put. And so we have the hope that one day plurals in general are more accepted, more understood, and also that plural conversations, plural interactions become more natural in the larger society, so that we can have that it becomes easier for systems to let individual members switch in and out and take turns in a conversation, which for us it's quite easy to do via text. When we text chat with other people, then it's easy to just put your initials or sign off messages as such. And it would be so great when it becomes more normal asking for individual opinions of system members, or not assuming that one opinion coming out of one mouth might be the whole system's opinion, but actually making sure, checking in with other system members as well, what they think about what just been said. And like when you actively notice a switch in a system or something, that you, if the system feels comfortable with that, that you acknowledge these switches, that you say, oh, hi, whoever switches in, that you greet them, that you treat them as if they just entered the room or whatever. And we hope, we got plans. We got plans for this particular topic. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this right now in this episode. There's a lot of indecisiveness in our system right now, but this is usually not a case where I should use my power as a system lord, but I'm just doing that right now. So we plan next year, we plan to bring other systems on the podcast and talk to them live, not live, but record them, record plural conversations between plurals. That's what I want to say. And I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be, first of all, fun for us. It's going to be fun for listeners. And I think it will help to get a better feeling or understanding for what it means to talk to other plurals. not just as a plural system, but also maybe having a public reference for singular people also to understand plural communication. That's the topic of this episode, which ends right now. So yeah, this is the end of this episode, and we told you a bit about the different forms of system communication, external and internal communication, what it is actually good for, as a basis for system work or system life, basically, systemhood. We shared, or rather mostly my handmaids shared, how we basically started out communicating with each other long before we knew about plurality and communication and all that stuff, and why it's so essential for us as a plural system and the community as a whole. Now the question to the audience, we actually didn't note down a question this time, so I would just come up with something on the spot. How does communication work for you as a system? What are your plans to work on next, or what have you been working on to improve your internal communication? Share all your tips and tricks in the comments, please. This episode was brought to you by the Voices of Jarvis, with me, Matt, as your host, and my handmaids, Yori and Will, as guests here. Well, guests, we are all equally owners of this podcast, actually. Thank you all beautiful souls for listening and your support. If you enjoyed this episode and think it brought a bit of value to your life, please tell a friend or more. Leave a like and subscribe, rate, comment, and all these cool things, because that will help others find this episode as well. Many thanks. As I always like to say, let your personality shine brighter than your eyes and your confidence shout louder than your voice. Until next time with Housemates for Life. And the part you have all been waiting for, have some outtakes for your chuckle master. Let's go. Let's go. Alright, I'm back. Here. In this what I want to say, see, communication. It really differs a lot from system to system. Whoopsie. Alrighty, and in the last part we wanna tell you sorry. Wait, no, I wanted to what? Communication.